The first light of morning seeped through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victor Langston's Boston penthouse, painting the city in a soft, golden hue. Leaves swirled gently along the quiet streets below, and the distant hum of traffic felt like background music to the rhythm of the city waking up. Victor, as always, was awake long before dawn, seated at his sleek kitchen island with a cup of espresso in hand. The aroma was strong, almost bitter, but it had become a comforting ritual, a small anchor in his otherwise tightly scheduled life. He swirled the coffee slowly, eyes scanning the spreadsheet on his laptop. Numbers, projections, and quarterly reports filled the screen, precise and predictable, much like the life he had built for himself. Precision had always been his friend, control his shield. And yet, that morning, an unfamiliar restlessness crept through him. It wasn't anything he could define, a subtle tension like a quiet tremor under the surface of everything he thought he knew. Angela, his maid, moved quietly through the apartment. She was a woman in her early 40s with gentle eyes that seemed to have carried more than their fair share of life's weight. Her movements were deliberate and calm, as if she carried invisible rules for navigating spaces she didn't own but somehow made her own. "Breakfast is ready," she said softly, placing plates on the dining table. Her voice had that steady, unassuming tone she always used around Victor, professional but polite, bordering on timid. Victor barely glanced up. "Thanks," he muttered, though something in the room made him pause. There was movement at the dining table, subtle at first. And then he noticed them, 4 children sitting around the table, laughing quietly, spooning syrup over pancakes as if they owned the place. Victor froze. His heart skipped a beat, not out of fear but disbelief. Who are these children?" His voice was sharper than he intended, slicing through the soft morning air. Angela stiffened for a split second. The pause was almost imperceptible, but it carried a weight that made Victor's chest tighten. They're friends from the neighborhood," she said slowly, words chosen carefully as if navigating a tightrope. "It was cold outside and I thought they might need breakfast." Victor's brows knit together. "Friends? I don't recall inviting anyone." He tried to keep his voice steady, but the mix of confusion and irritation was unmistakable. They don't have anyone at home right now," Angela continued, glancing at the children. "I didn't want them to be out in the cold." Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, almost trembling. Victor studied the children. They weren't messy, but their clothes were worn. Their hair was a little unkempt, as if mornings were more about surviving than styling. Yet they laughed freely, their small voices and bright eyes carrying a confidence he hadn't expected. The youngest, a little girl no older than 6, looked up at him with eyes that seemed far too knowing for someone her age. "What's your name, little one?" he asked, curiosity breaking through his irritation. "Lila," she answered softly, her voice steady and calm. "Where are your parents?" Victor pressed, trying to mask the sudden weight in his chest. They're busy," Lila replied, and then added with a small shrug, "Dad isn't around." Victor's hand tightened around his coffee cup. There was a pang of something he hadn't felt in years, a mixture of surprise and unease. The little girl's tone carried more honesty than most adults he knew, and for a moment he realized how little he had ever truly listened to anyone. Angela looked down, swallowing hard. "Victor, I didn't mean to overstep. I couldn't leave them outside." Victor leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. There were meetings, investors, schedules, all carefully orchestrated pieces of a life that demanded perfection. Yet, staring at these 4 children, something inside him hesitated. He felt an unfamiliar tug, a quiet question gnawing at the edges of his controlled world. Why do I care so much about this? For a brief moment, Victor considered saying nothing, maintaining the order he was so accustomed to. But something about the way Angela watched over the children, protective, almost reverent, made him pause. He realized she wasn't just bending rules, she was quietly carrying the weight of their world on her own. And just as he opened his mouth to speak, Lila's small hand reached for the syrup, spilling a little onto the table. The sound, a tiny splatter against the plate, broke the tension. Victor exhaled, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of his lips. In that moment he realized this morning would not be like any other. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit subscribe and follow along. You won't want to miss what happens next. And comment below. Where are you watching from? I'd love to hear from you. But even as he tried to regain control of his morning, Victor couldn't shake the feeling that there was more here than breakfast and spilled syrup. Something was about to unfold, something that would quietly, irrevocably shift his life. And he didn't yet know it. Victor watched Angela guide the children from the dining table, his mind swirling with questions he wasn't ready to ask aloud. The little girl Lila skipped ahead slightly, her small boots scuffing softly against the polished hardwood floor. The boys followed closely, whispering to each other, their chatter low but full of excitement. Tiny bursts of normalcy in a world that, judging by their appearance, had offered them very little of it. Angela moved like a quiet guardian, careful not to jostle, careful not to draw attention, yet somehow fully in command. Victor had always been precise, but there was an elegance to her chaos, a rhythm to the way she balanced care and discipline simultaneously. And he realized, almost with a jolt, that he had never truly seen her as a person beyond the tasks she performed in his penthouse. "Victor," Angela said softly, pulling him from his thoughts, "I didn't mean for this to happen. I know it's unconventional." He shook his head, the words catching in his throat. I want to understand. Who are these kids really?" Angela hesitated, glancing back at the children. The oldest boy, maybe 10, was tugging on her sleeve, whispering a question she answered with a quick nod. Victor saw it, the trust in their eyes, the quiet obedience, but he also noticed something else: fear. A subtle, brittle fear beneath the playful chatter. "They're my responsibility," she said finally, almost as if admitting it aloud gave it weight she hadn't intended. "I've been taking care of them for a while. Their parents, they're not able to." Victor's brow furrowed. "Not able? How long?" "Years," Angela whispered. Her voice was steady but small, a fragile thread of courage stretched taut. "I didn't ask for them. I didn't have to. But I couldn't leave them alone." Victor felt a tightness in his chest, a pang he hadn't anticipated. He had never considered what it meant to be responsible for 4 children who weren't yours, to carry the weight of their lives silently, invisibly, while the world continued obliviously around you. His life had always been about control, about predictability. And here, in the span of a single morning, he was confronted with a world that had no such guarantees. They moved toward the elevator and Victor followed. The city below was waking up fully now, the crunch of leaves under shoes, the distant bark of a dog, the faint roar of a bus engine. Angela's apartment building emerged at the corner of a quiet street in Dorchester, its red brick facade weathered by years of wind and rain. It was ordinary, unremarkable, almost forgotten, except Victor realized it was a sanctuary in disguise. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of overcooked rice and laundry detergent. Toys were scattered across the floor, textbooks piled unevenly on a small table, and the walls were decorated with drawings that looked like little windows into the children's imaginations. Victor bent down to pick up a crayon drawing, a crude sketch of a sun and 4 stick figures, and the name Lila was scrawled carefully in the corner. These are really nice," Victor said softly, almost to himself. Angela smiled faintly but didn't respond. She was busy guiding the children into a modest living area, making sure everyone had a seat, that no one banged into furniture or upset the fragile order she had maintained here for so long. Victor's gaze drifted over the room, noting small details: a shelf lined with books that were dog-eared and well-read, a few board games stacked haphazardly, and in the corner, a small worn couch with a blanket folded neatly on top. Then he noticed the letters pinned to the wall: medical bills, school notices, and official-looking documents that spoke of responsibilities far beyond what anyone would expect from someone without legal authority. He picked up one of the letters. The bold print on the top made his stomach tighten. Guardianship of minor children, termination imminent. Angela noticed his reaction. I didn't want you to see that," she said quietly, her hands tightening around her sleeve. They might take the kids from me." Victor's mind reeled. The neat boundaries of his world, The stock options, the meetings, the contracts, felt absurdly small in comparison to the stakes in this room. He had never understood the quiet courage it took to protect 4 children's lives against a system that could strip them away at any moment. Lila, sensing the tension, crept closer to Angela. Victor caught the little girl's eyes again, bright, unwavering, yet haunted by the fragility around her. A shiver ran down his spine. How could such resilience exist in someone so small, in a world that had offered so little? Angela finally met his gaze, her own steady but trembling. "I've done what I can," she whispered. "But it's not enough, and soon I might lose them." Victor swallowed hard. He wanted to say something, anything, to make the fear disappear, but words felt inadequate. All he could do was look at Angela and the children and realize something that made his heart pound. This was bigger than him, bigger than wealth, bigger than any plan he had ever made. He didn't yet know how he would respond, but he did know one thing. He couldn't turn away. Not now. Not when he had already been drawn into a story that would quietly, irrevocably change the course of all their lives. And just as he stood there, a soft knock on the apartment door startled him. He hadn't noticed anyone else was in the building. Who could it be and why now? The knock on the door was soft, almost hesitant, but in the quiet apartment, it echoed like a warning. Victor froze for a moment, instinctively stepping closer to Angela. The children, sensing the tension, paused mid-whisper, their small bodies stiffening. Lila clutched Angela's hand, and the boys exchanged uneasy glances, their eyes darting to the door. Angela took a slow, deliberate step toward the entrance, her hand hovering over the lock. I don't think anyone's supposed to be here," she said softly. Her voice was calm, but Victor could hear the subtle edge of fear beneath her words. "Maybe a neighbor?" he suggested, though his gut told him something was off. She shook her head. "Not at this hour. Not today." Victor moved closer, his presence a quiet reassurance to both Angela and the children. He could feel the weight of their world pressing down on him. The fragile routines, the invisible vigilance that had kept chaos at bay. It was a world he had never known, and now, suddenly, he was inside it. Angela exhaled and opened the door slowly. A man in a dark suit stood there, holding a folder thick with papers. His expression was stern, professional, unyielding. "Good morning," he said, his tone clipped. "I'm from the Department of Family Services. I need to speak with the guardian of these children." Angela's grip on Lila's hand tightened. I'm Angela. They're with me." Her voice wavered, but her stance was firm. Victor stepped forward, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "I'm Victor Langston. I'm just visiting. Please wait." The man's gaze flicked to Victor, assessing him quickly before returning to Angela. "This isn't a social call. We have a court order. Guardianship of these minors is under review. Effective immediately, you are no longer their legal guardian, and the children may be taken into state care." Angela's face drained of color. Her knees threatened to buckle, and Victor had to steady her with a hand on her shoulder. Lila's small gasp echoed in the room, and the boys froze, their expressions a mixture of fear and confusion. Victor's mind raced. He had seen bills, notices, hints of bureaucratic pressure, but this was immediate, urgent, life-altering. He realized the gravity of the moment. Angela had been risking everything to provide a semblance of stability, and now the walls of that fragile world threatened to collapse. He turned to the man. "Wait, there must be some mistake. She's been taking care of these children. There's no one else. They can't be taken like this." The man shook his head. "The law is clear. Unless a legal guardian steps in or new evidence is presented, the children will be placed in temporary care. We're following protocol." Victor's chest tightened. Protocol. Laws. Paperwork. None of it accounted for courage, for quiet sacrifice, for the emotional bonds Angela had nurtured day after day. He swallowed hard, his thoughts spinning faster than he could speak. He looked at the children. Their faces mirrored the fear and confusion that had filled Angela's eyes. He noticed Lila, who seemed braver than her years, gripping Angela's hand so tightly it was almost painful to watch. Her eyes, wide, serious, and piercing, met his, and in them he saw a reflection of helplessness he couldn't ignore. Angela's voice broke the silence. Please, there has to be another way. I've done everything I can, everything. I love these children like they're my own. Victor felt a surge of something unfamiliar. Anger, yes, but also determination. This wasn't just paperwork. This wasn't just protocol. These were lives, small, fragile, precious lives hanging in the balance. And he wasn't about to let them slip away unnoticed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I have resources. Legal counsel. Influence. We can appeal this. We can fight for them. Angela's eyes softened slightly, but the fear lingered. Victor, I didn't ask for this. I didn't want their lives tangled up with someone like you. Victor shook his head. No. You saved them long before I even knew they existed. I can't look away now. For a moment, there was a heavy silence, broken only by the faint ticking of a wall clock and the soft shuffle of small feet. Then, from the corner of the room, the youngest boy whispered, almost under his breath, Do they take us away forever? Victor's heart clenched. He knelt down, bringing himself to the children's level. Not if I can help it, he said firmly, meeting each of their eyes. Not if I can help it. Angela exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and exhaustion washing over her. But Victor knew this was only the beginning. The fight hadn't even started yet. And the realization settled over him like a weight he couldn't shrug off. Protecting these children wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be simple. Just as he was about to speak again, Lila tugged at his sleeve, her small hand surprisingly firm. Wait, you know me, don't you? Victor froze. Her words cut through the chaos like a knife. Why did she sound familiar? Why did her eyes feel known? The air seemed to thicken. Something about Lila's gaze pulled at a memory he couldn't place. A moment long buried, a detail from years ago that refused to stay buried. And in that instant, Victor understood that this story, Angela, the children, Lila, was far more entangled with his own past than he could have imagined. Victor's mind spun as Lila's words hung in the air. Wait, you know me, don't you? The question was so small, so simple, yet it struck like a lightning bolt. He knelt to meet her gaze, searching for a flicker of recognition that might explain why her eyes felt familiar. But all he saw was innocence tempered by an odd, knowing confidence, a quiet intelligence that seemed far beyond her 6 years. Angela stepped closer, placing a protective hand on Lila's shoulder. Victor, it's not what you think, she said softly, though the tension in her voice betrayed her worry. She's just sensitive, that's all. Victor shook his head. No, there's something here. Something I'm missing. He glanced at the boys who were watching silently, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Their small faces were etched with curiosity, confusion, and caution. Even at their age, Victor could see they understood this moment was unusual, significant. He took a deep breath, letting the scent of the small apartment fill his senses, a mixture of laundry soap, slightly overcooked rice, and the faint tang of crayons on paper. It was ordinary yet profoundly human, so different from the antiseptic perfection of his penthouse, where everything smelled of polished wood and filtered air. Here life was messy, lived, and imperfect. And he felt exposed, as if the walls themselves had secrets he hadn't anticipated. Angela, he said carefully, how long has it been like this? Taking care of them, I mean. Angela hesitated. Her gaze flicked to the floor, then back to Victor. Almost 4 years, she said finally. Her voice was quiet, but firm, each word weighted with the kind of truth that carries both pride and fear. I took them in after their parents couldn't. I didn't have to. I couldn't leave them alone. Victor's heart ached at the simplicity and the magnitude of her words. 4 years. For children depending entirely on someone who wasn't legally recognized to protect them. The realization made his chest tighten. He had spent his life accumulating wealth, influence, power, but here, in a modest apartment on a quiet Boston street, those things felt irrelevant. You've been doing all of this on your own? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Angela nodded. On my own. I work, I save, I stretch every penny. I cook, I clean, I make sure they're fed and clothed, get to school, go to the doctor, everything. And still, I wake up every day wondering if it will be enough. Victor felt a knot of guilt tighten in his stomach. He had always prided himself on helping people in abstract ways, donations, foundations, corporate philanthropy, but never like this, never close enough to see the direct impact of his actions. Here was someone quietly risking her own security, her own future, for the well-being of children who had no one else. And he hadn't noticed. The children shuffled closer to Angela, forming a protective little circle. Lila's small hand remained tucked into Angela's palm, but she stole glances at Victor, her expression serious and unflinching. He realized then that the bond between these children and Angela was unbreakable. It wasn't just care, it was love, trust, survival. Victor exhaled slowly, forcing himself to speak. Angela, you've been carrying a lot by yourself. I've done what I had to, she said simply, almost dismissively, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion, fear, and determination all at once. For a long moment, Victor just looked at them, the children, the small fortress of safety Angela had built around them. He felt the strange, heavy pull of responsibility settle over him. This wasn't a spreadsheet, a contract, or a market opportunity. This was real human life, and it demanded something he wasn't used to: presence, attention, courage. Then, almost quietly, Victor said, I think I need to see everything. Where they sleep, what they eat, what their mornings are like. I need to understand the whole picture. Angela's eyes widened. Victor, it's not exactly orderly. Well, she hesitated, unsure how to convey the chaos and love that existed in the same space. Victor smiled faintly. I don't need perfect. I just need real. As Angela began to lead him further into the apartment, Victor couldn't shake the sensation that he was stepping into a world that had always existed alongside his own, but one he had never truly acknowledged. Each small step, each glance at worn furniture, scattered toys, and little drawings on the walls, was a reminder that life was messy, beautiful, and fleeting. But then, as they reached the back corner of the apartment, Victor noticed a small shoebox tucked beneath the shelf. Curiosity piqued, he bent down and opened it. Inside were photographs. Angela with children smiling at the camera, their clothes worn but their faces bright with joy. And tucked in the middle, slightly out of place, was a photo of a little girl holding out a tiny hand, a hand that looked unmistakably familiar. Victor's breath caught. He stared frozen. There was something about the angle of the photograph, the curve of the girl's small fingers, that stirred a memory deep in his mind. Something he couldn't quite place. A fleeting feeling of déjà vu, sharp and insistent. Victor. Angela's voice broke through his thoughts. Are you okay? He swallowed hard. I think I've seen her before. The children, oblivious to the storm of realization brewing in his mind, continued to chatter softly, but Victor felt the world tilt slightly. This wasn't just a morning like any other. This wasn't just Angela's secret life. Something about this little girl, this Lila, was about to unravel a truth he had buried long ago. And in that quiet, cluttered apartment, Victor understood that nothing in his carefully ordered life would ever be the same again. Victor couldn't shake the photo from his mind. He held it in his hands, staring at the small outstretched fingers, the bright eyes of a child that seemed to pierce right through him. Something in his chest tightened, a mix of recognition, disbelief, and an almost instinctive pull he couldn't explain. He looked up at Angela, but her expression was calm, almost serene, though he could sense the tension beneath the surface. They've been living like this for years? He asked slowly, his voice low. All of them, under your care, without legal recognition? Angela nodded, her eyes shifting briefly to the children. Yes. Every day has been a balancing act. I work long hours, I save every penny, I make sure they're fed and safe. But the law, it doesn't see love or effort. It only sees paperwork and legal guardianship. Soon they could take them away. I can't fight it alone. Victor exhaled, running a hand through his hair. His carefully controlled life, the board meetings, the investor calls, the wealth and influence he prided himself on, suddenly felt shallow. In that small, cluttered apartment, with toys scattered on the floor and drawings taped haphazardly to the walls, the fragility of human life had never been more vivid. He knelt to the children's level, trying to ground himself in their presence. The boys glanced up nervously, their small hands fidgeting in their laps. Lila, however, met his eyes directly. Something in her gaze held his attention like gravity pulling on an object long overdue to be noticed. "I want to help," Victor said finally, his voice firmer. "I don't know how much or what I can do, but I can't just stand by." Angela's lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak but didn't trust the words to come out. "Victor, I appreciate that, but," she hesitated, then added softly, "you don't know what it's like to be responsible for 4 children and know the system could take them any moment. It's terrifying." Victor nodded, letting the words sink in. He had never been responsible for anyone but himself. Decisions, consequences, success, they were all abstract concepts, tied to numbers and contracts, not fragile human hearts. But now he was staring at a reality he couldn't ignore. The children watched him, wide-eyed, sensing the unusual gravity in the room. Lila shifted closer to Angela, her small hand brushing the edge of Victor's sleeve. It was such a simple gesture, but it struck him with profound weight. Trust, dependency, and something he couldn't yet articulate. Victor's gaze returned to the photograph he had found. The memory it sparked was still out of reach, teasing him like the faintest echo of a dream. He tried to recall where he had seen those eyes before, that same small hand reaching out, but the details were elusive. It was frustrating, unnerving, but impossible to ignore. Angela noticed his distraction. "Victor, are you all right?" I think I've seen her before," he admitted. His voice was barely above a whisper, as if saying it louder might shatter the fragile bubble of calm in the apartment. "This little girl, Lila. There's something about her." Lila tilted her head slightly, a small, knowing smile tugging at her lips. "I remember you too," she said softly, almost shyly. Her voice was steady, calm, yet carried a weight far beyond her years. "From a long time ago." Victor's pulse quickened. His mind raced through memories, flickers of a park, a wallet, a small hand reaching out to return it. Could it be? The image blurred for a moment as he tried to reconcile the child before him with the memory stirring deep inside him. His pulse pounded against his ribs, his chest tight with disbelief and something he hadn't felt in years: connection. Angela's hand squeezed Lila's shoulder. "Victor, she's telling the truth. You helped her before, when she was younger. But she's grown up so fast and we've had to survive without much help." Her voice trembled slightly, and Victor could see the years of struggle etched into her small face, and Angela's own quiet suffering. Victor felt a knot in his stomach. He had come here thinking he might help in small ways, perhaps with resources, maybe even a legal intervention, but he hadn't anticipated the personal tie. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was someone he had unknowingly touched in the past, and now her life was intertwined with people he had just begun to understand. He exhaled slowly, trying to calm the storm of thoughts and emotions swirling inside him. He knew one thing with certainty: the children couldn't be left to chance. They couldn't be left vulnerable. And Angela, this quiet, tireless woman who had carried so much on her own, deserved help, support, and recognition for everything she had sacrificed. Victor looked around the small apartment, taking in the scattered toys, the faint smell of breakfast still lingering, the artwork taped to the walls. It was imperfect, chaotic, and utterly human. And in that imperfection he felt the first stirrings of purpose beyond wealth and control, a purpose tied to care, courage, and connection. Then, almost imperceptibly, a sound came from the hallway outside, the muffled squeak of shoes against the stairwell carpet. Victor turned sharply, his instincts telling him that someone, unexpected, unannounced, was about to arrive. And as the door creaked open just slightly, revealing a shadow he hadn't anticipated, Victor realized that the morning's revelations were only the beginning, and the real storm was about to hit. Victor's eyes snapped to the shadow at the slightly ajar door. The silhouette was tall, formal, and unfamiliar. His mind raced. Another social worker? Another bureaucrat here to enforce rules he had barely begun to understand? Or something else entirely? Angela stepped forward instinctively, placing herself between the children and the figure. Her voice, calm but firm, carried authority she didn't usually allow herself. "Can I help you?" The man stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. "Mr. Langston?" His tone was polite, measured. "I wasn't expecting anyone else here, but I need to speak with you directly." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Speak with me? About what?" "My name is Detective Harris. Boston PD," the man said, producing a badge briefly before tucking it away. "I've been looking into a situation involving these children." He gestured vaguely toward the room, careful not to alarm the kids. "There are reports of neglect in their previous living situation. I just need to clarify a few details." Angela stiffened. "Detective, I assure you I've taken care of them." Her voice faltered, but her stance didn't. "Everything I've done to protect them." Victor stepped slightly in front of her, shielding the children without even thinking about it. "Detective, I've been introduced to these kids today, and I can assure you, this woman has been their guardian in every meaningful way. She's the reason they're safe right now." Harris's eyes flicked between Victor and Angela, noting the protective stance, the seriousness in Victor's expression. "I don't doubt her intentions. But the law is clear. Documentation is required. Legal guardianship is necessary for them to remain under anyone's care outside state systems." Victor exhaled slowly. "I understand the paperwork," he said, choosing his words carefully. "But the law doesn't account for courage, for sacrifice, or for lives quietly lived in survival. And right now, I think the law might be missing something vital about these children." Lila, who had been standing near the couch, whispered, "Victor, do you remember me?" Her voice was soft, almost a thread of sound. But there was no mistaking the weight behind it. Victor felt the familiar pang in his chest, the same one from the photo earlier. He knelt to meet her gaze. I think I do. It's just a memory that's very faint, but it's there. You saved me once, a long time ago, and I never forgot it." The detective's presence seemed to fade for a moment as Victor's mind traced the memory. A park bench, a wallet lost in a crowded street, a small hand returning it. The girl before him, Lila, was unmistakably the same child. He had seen her years ago, and now the child he hadn't noticed in his own life was standing in his apartment, alive, resilient, and tethered to Angela's unwavering care. Angela's hand squeezed Lila's shoulder, whispering, "See? He remembers." Harris cleared his throat. "Mr. Langston, this isn't a courtroom, and I'm not here to debate memory. I need to confirm facts for the welfare of these children. If you're involved, it will be noted." Victor straightened, his resolve hardening. "Detective, I will make sure you see the truth. Not just the paperwork, but the lives, the people who are living them, and the woman who's risked everything to protect these children. That's what matters here." The children huddled closer to Angela, sensing the gravity of the conversation. Victor could feel the tension in their small bodies, the subtle tremor in Lila's hands, the nervous shuffle of the boys' feet. They had been living on the edge of exposure and vulnerability for years, and now, suddenly, the fragility of their world was laid bare before him. Detective Harris studied Victor, the woman, and the children. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. Victor's presence, his protective stance, and the unmistakable weight of authority, earned not by title but by determination, was palpable. Then Victor noticed something subtle but chilling. Outside the window, the faint outline of a man standing across the street. Watching. Not moving, just observing. He couldn't tell if the figure was related to Angela's past, the children's former guardians, or something else entirely, but the sense of danger was immediate, palpable. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Angela, did anyone ever come looking for them before?" he asked quietly. She shook her head slowly, lips pressed together. "Not like this, but sometimes there are people from the past who never really let go." Victor exhaled sharply, glancing at the children again. He realized the apartment, while a safe haven until now, might not be enough to protect them for long. Someone, or something, from the shadows of their past was stirring, and it was only a matter of time before it reached them. And at that moment, the gentle morning light that had filtered through the windows felt suddenly dangerous, threatening, as though it were illuminating secrets best left hidden. Victor's jaw tightened. You would have to act. And fast. Victor didn't take his eyes off the man across the street. The figure stood too still, pretending to scroll on a phone that never moved. Whoever he was, he wasn't just passing by. Detective, Victor said calmly, lowering his voice, before you leave I need to ask, are there any open cases connected to these children? Anyone searching for them? Detective Harris followed Victor's gaze toward the window. His expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. That depends, he replied. Why do you ask? Because someone's watching this apartment, Victor said flatly. Angela's breath caught. She stepped closer to the window, then froze. Her face drained of color. Oh no, she whispered. Harris straightened instantly. You recognize him? Angela nodded slowly. Not him exactly. But that posture, that waiting. It's the same as before. Victor turned to her. Before what? Angela swallowed. Before the threats. Before the night we had to run. The children stiffened at her words. One of the boys grabbed her sleeve, his knuckles white. Lila's eyes darted between the adults, fear flickering like a shadow she knew too well. Detective Harris exhaled sharply. Ms. Angela, that's information you should have disclosed. I was afraid, she said, her voice cracking. Every time I spoke up, things got worse. People disappeared. Complaints vanished. I learned the safest way to protect them was to stay invisible. Victor felt something ignite inside his chest. Anger not at Angela, but at a system that had forced her into silence. You shouldn't have had to do that, he said. Harris checked his watch. I need to make a call. He stepped into the hallway, already speaking into his phone. The apartment felt smaller without him. Too quiet. Victor crouched in front of the children. Listen to me, he said gently. You're safe right now. I promise. Lila studied his face. People always say that, she murmured. But they leave. Victor's heart clenched. He hesitated, then said, I'm not leaving. Angela looked at him sharply. Victor. I mean it, he said, meeting her eyes. Whatever this is, I'm involved now. Before she could respond, there was a sharp knock on the door. 3 fast raps. Not polite. Not hesitant. Everyone froze. Victor rose slowly. Detective, he called. No answer. The knock came again, louder this time. Angela whispered, That's not him. Victor motioned for the children to move back. He took one step toward the door when a voice called out, smooth and unfamiliar. Open up. We just want to talk. Victor felt the weight of the moment settle into his bones. Who are you? He demanded. Pause. Then, friends of the family. Angela shook her head violently. Don't open it. The handle rattled slightly, testing. Not forcing, yet. Victor's mind raced. The apartment had one exit. One staircase. Too many lives depending on his next move. He glanced toward the back window, calculating distances, angles, time. Then Detective Harris's voice echoed from the hallway. Step away from the door. Footsteps thundered. A scuffle erupted outside. Shouts, a crash, something metallic hitting the floor. The children screamed. Victor rushed forward just as the door burst open, only to see Harris pinning a man to the ground, his knee pressed into the stranger's back. Another man fled down the stairs, disappearing before anyone could stop him. Harris cuffed the man swiftly. Boston PD, he barked. You're done. The man laughed, a cold, hollow sound. You think this ends here? He sneered, locking eyes with Angela. You can't hide forever. Victor stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. You won't get another chance. The man smirked. We'll see. Harris hauled him up and radioed for backup. Then he turned to Victor, his expression grim. You were right. These kids are at risk. This just became a full investigation. Angela sank onto the couch, shaking. The children clung to her, crying silently. Victor knelt beside them. This ends now, he said quietly, but with absolute certainty. Outside, sirens wailed closer. But Victor knew the truth. This was only the beginning. Because someone had finally noticed the children. And others had noticed too, for all the wrong reasons. Victor leaned against the wall, catching his breath. The children clung to Angela, their small bodies trembling, eyes wide as Detective Harris secured the intruder in his cuffs. The man's hollow laugh still echoed in Victor's mind, a chilling reminder that the danger hadn't vanished, just postponed. Angela pressed a hand to Lila's forehead, as if shielding her from more than just the immediate threat. "I've never seen them give up," she whispered, almost to herself. "But sometimes, I wonder if I've pushed too hard." Victor crouched beside Lila. "You didn't push too hard," he said gently. "You kept them alive. You gave them hope when nobody else would." He saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes, but the weight of years without safety still lingered. Detective Harris returned, radio crackling faintly at his belt. "Backup's on the way. We'll secure the building and get a proper statement from all of you. You did right by calling me Mr. Langston?" Victor nodded slowly. "But what about them?" He gestured toward the children, who were now cautiously peeking out from behind Angela. Harris's jaw tightened. "The law will take over temporarily if nothing is filed. But it's clear, these children aren't at risk because of neglect. They've been cared for well beyond what's expected in many homes." Victor felt a surge of resolve. "Then we fight this properly. Legally, safely. They shouldn't have to leave Angela. Not now. Not ever." Angela looked at him, tears glimmering. "Victor, it's dangerous. If we go public, if we fight the system, there are people who won't just let this go." Victor straightened, his eyes hard. "Then we won't let them." Harris studied him. "You're serious about this?" Victor didn't hesitate. "Completely. I can provide resources, legal teams, influence. We make sure Angela keeps her guardianship, and we ensure these children stay safe, legally and physically." Angela's lips trembled. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Victor said simply. "Let me help." Angela hesitated, glancing at the children. They were already beginning to calm, reassured by Victor's calm presence, though their tiny hands still clung to her sleeves and each other. Finally she nodded. Yes, we'll do it." Harris made a note in his pad, his eyes still scanning the street. "We'll need statements, evidence, anything you can provide about your guardianship and the children's well-being. We start building the case today." Victor exhaled. "Then we start immediately." The children, sensing the shift in tension, relaxed slightly. Lila leaned forward, tilting her head, studying Victor. "So, you really are helping us?" she asked softly. "I promise," Victor said. "No one's taking you away. Not while I can stop it." Angela smiled faintly, exhausted but relieved. "I've been carrying this alone for so long. I didn't think anyone would step in." Victor shook his head. "It shouldn't have to be just one person. None of this should ever have been just you." For the first time, a quiet energy settled over the apartment, a fragile sense of possibility, of safety. But Victor knew better than to let himself relax completely. The intruder had only been one of the shadows from the past. The system might move slowly, but it could still be manipulated by people who wanted the children gone. Victor's eyes drifted back to Lila. There was something about her presence that stirred memories in him, fleeting flashes he couldn't place fully. And yet he knew one thing: she wasn't just a child in need of protection. There was a connection between them that went deeper, a truth he had yet to uncover. And as he studied her face, a detail struck him: the tiny scar on her wrist, faint but unmistakable. His chest tightened. That scar? It belonged to someone he had encountered years ago in circumstances that had nearly cost him everything. Victor's thoughts raced. Could it be? Was Lila connected to him in ways he had never imagined? The possibility was dizzying, terrifying, and utterly compelling. Before he could ask, there was a sudden buzz from his phone. A message flashed across the screen: "We know where they are. Move carefully. They're watching." Victor froze. His jaw clenched. Someone was still out there. Someone was still trying to reach them. Angela grabbed his arm. "What is it?" He showed her the message. Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. I thought it was over," she whispered. Victor shook his head slowly. "It's just beginning." The city outside was alive with morning activity, oblivious to the storm brewing in this small apartment. But Victor knew one thing: they had to act fast. Because the shadows from the past weren't finished. And someone, or something, was coming for them. Victor stared at the message again, his mind racing. We know where they are. Move carefully. They're watching. His chest tightened. Someone out there knew about the children, about Angela, and now about him. Whoever it was, they weren't bluffing. Angela's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the couch. Victor, this isn't just paperwork or random threats. These people, they've been involved before. Before the kids even came to me. They know everything. Victor swallowed hard. Everything? Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Their parents, their past, my attempts to protect them. And now, they know you're involved too. Victor's mind reeled. The city outside moved obliviously, the honks of traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, the faint thrum of life continuing as usual. But inside this apartment, time had slowed, compressed into a single pressing question. Who was watching and what did they want? He crouched down beside Lila, studying her carefully. She had returned to her small chair, fidgeting with a piece of paper she had picked up earlier. But her eyes, so bright and piercing, met his with uncanny awareness. It was as if she could see more than he could, understand more than she had any right to. Lila, he said gently, do you remember anything about me? Before today? Her small hands froze. She looked at him, then at Angela, as if seeking permission. Angela nodded slightly and Lila's lips parted. I remember a man. A man with a tall coat. A briefcase. He helped me once when I was small. I don't remember everything. But I remember him. Victor's heart skipped a beat. Every word she spoke stirred a memory in him. A day years ago, a wallet dropped on a crowded street, a small hand reaching out to return it. That moment had seemed trivial at the time, yet now, in the presence of this child, it took on new weight. He reached out slowly. That man, that was me. Lila's eyes widened. You're the one? Victor nodded. I didn't know it then. I couldn't have known, but I remember now. And I never forgot. Angela gasped softly, a mix of shock and awe crossing her face. Victor, you have no idea what this means to her. To them. To all of us. Victor's mind raced. This wasn't just a rescue operation anymore. It was personal. Lila wasn't just one of the children under Angela's care. She had a history with him, a thread that connected their lives in ways neither of them had fully understood until now. But there was no time to dwell on sentimentality. Victor's phone buzzed again, a new message. We know she remembers. Move before it's too late. He looked up at Angela. They know Lila remembers me. They know the connection. Angela's face went pale. Victor, they can't know. If they do, they'll come for her directly. For all of them. I've been hiding her all these years and now you've brought attention to her. Victor's jaw tightened. Then we hide smarter. We protect harder. I'll make sure no one gets close. Not now, not ever. Lila tilted her head. Are you going to take us away? Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to sound brave. Victor knelt and looked her directly in the eyes. No, you're staying safe. I promise. But we need to be careful. From now on, everything changes. People from the past, they won't stop until they find what they're looking for. Angela exhaled slowly, relief and fear mingling in her expression. Victor, I didn't think anyone would ever help like this. Not really. But now it feels different. Real. Victor nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him like a second skin. He had never felt anything like it before. This sense of urgency, purpose, and personal connection, all intertwined with fear and hope. Then he noticed the oldest boy at the back of the room, quietly observing him. His eyes were wary but calculating, as if assessing whether Victor could be trusted. Victor crouched to meet him. I know you don't know me yet, he said gently, but I'm on your side. I won't let anything happen to you or your siblings. The boy nodded slowly, still cautious, but the tension in his body eased slightly. Victor turned back to Lila. We start now. We plan. We move carefully. And we make sure no one ever gets close to hurting you again. Lila's small hand reached for his. I believe you, she whispered. Victor's heart tightened. In that moment he realized the stakes had just doubled. Protecting the children wasn't just about law or resources, it was about trust, memory, and the fragile bonds that held them all together. Outside, the city carried on, unaware of the storm gathering in the quiet apartment. But Victor knew one thing with absolute certainty. The past had found them, and the future depended on what they did next. And as he stared out the window, his mind racing with plans, a faint sound of tires skidding against asphalt reached his ears, a warning that someone was already moving toward them. Victor's gaze locked on the street below. The faint skid of tires had stopped, but he knew it was only a temporary lull. Whoever had sent the warning wasn't just toying with them, they were testing, observing, planning their next move. Angela stood beside him, tense, one hand gripping the back of Lila's chair. Victor, I've done everything I can to stay invisible, she whispered. But they know where we are now. They'll come again. And next time, her voice faltered, eyes wide with fear. Victor exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility tighten around his chest. Next time they won't get close. Not if I can help it. We'll move carefully and we'll make sure the kids are safe. Lila stepped forward, her small frame surprisingly steady. We can't just hide, she said softly. They'll find us anyway. We have to fight smart. Victor looked at her, astonished. She was only 6, yet her words carried a clarity and determination that echoed what he had felt moments before. This wasn't just about survival, it was about strategy. You're right, he admitted. We can't just hide. We have to plan and we have to be ready for anything. Angela nodded slowly, swallowing hard. Then we start tonight. There are people I've trusted before, contacts who can help us. But it has to be fast. And secret. Victor turned back to the children, crouching down to meet their eyes. I'm going to protect you, he said firmly. No one gets close without going through me first. You trust me? The children nodded cautiously. Lila gave a small, determined smile. I do, she whispered. Victor felt a wave of resolve wash over him. The danger outside was real, but he would not let it define them. Not Angela, not the children, and certainly not Lila, the girl whose presence had stirred memories he hadn't realized he carried for so many years. He moved to Angela, lowering his voice. We need to gather everything that matters, documents, photographs, anything that proves their guardianship and their safety under your care. And then we find a secure location. Somewhere they can't reach easily. Angela's eyes flickered with gratitude and fear. There's a safe house I've used before, she said quietly. It's discreet. Few people know about it. We can leave tonight. Victor nodded. Good. I'll arrange security, transport, and legal counsel. No one will follow us. As he spoke, his phone buzzed again. Another message, they're closer than you think. Move fast. Victor's jaw tightened. The urgency of the situation had escalated beyond abstract warnings. Someone was actively hunting them now. The shadows that had haunted Angela and the children for years were emerging in full force. He turned to Lila, crouching to her level. You need to stay calm, okay? No sudden moves. Just trust me and Angela. Do you understand? I understand, she whispered. Her small hand slid into his. He felt the familiar weight of responsibility tighten around him. The fragile lives in his hands, the connection to a past he had only begun to unravel, and the determination to fight for them. Angela gathered the children, moving quickly to collect essentials. Clothing, small toys, anything that might make the move less terrifying. Victor watched her, marveling at her calm efficiency under pressure. She had been carrying this weight alone for years, and now, with his help, they were finally mounting a defense. By nightfall, the group was ready. The children were quiet but alert, sensing the gravity of what was happening. Victor and Angela led them out the apartment, taking a circuitous route through the building and into a waiting vehicle. The streets of Boston were alive with lights and movement, yet they moved unseen, shadows among shadows. Victor kept glancing in the rearview mirror. Every corner, every alley, Every car drew his attention. He felt the tension tighten with each passing block. Whoever had been following them wasn't far behind. Finally, the vehicle slowed to a stop outside a nondescript building. Angela led the children inside, checking the locks, securing the entrances, and ensuring every window was covered. Victor breathed a quiet sigh of relief. For the first time that day they were physically safe, but the emotional and legal battles were just beginning. He knelt beside Lila once more. "You're safe here," he said, his voice low but steady. "No one gets near you." She looked up at him, her eyes wide but trusting. "I know," she whispered. "Because you're here." Victor exhaled slowly, a surge of determination coursing through him. The night was dark outside, but inside, a fragile fortress had been built, a place of temporary safety. And as Victor stared at the children, he knew one truth: protecting them was no longer a choice. It was a mission, a promise, and a reckoning with a past that had refused to stay buried. But deep down he sensed that the next move, the one that would truly test all of them, was coming faster than anyone could anticipate. Victor paced the small living room of the safe house, the city's faint hum outside doing little to calm the storm in his mind. The children were quiet for now, playing with a few toys Angela had brought along, but Victor knew the calm was fragile. Every moment that passed could bring new danger. Angela sat at the table, spreading out documents, school records, medical reports, old adoption papers, and photos she had managed to keep hidden for years. "This is everything I could find," she said softly. "It proves I've been their guardian, their caretaker for nearly 4 years. But I don't know if it will be enough in court. The system, the law, it's complicated." Victor leaned over, scanning the papers quickly. "It won't just be enough. We'll make it undeniable. I've already reached out to a legal team experienced with cases like this. They'll draft a case that leaves no room for doubt." Angela's lips trembled. "Victor, I never asked for this. I've been managing, barely surviving, on my own. And now you've brought all this attention." Victor shook his head firmly. "I didn't bring attention for the sake of drama. I brought it to protect you and the children. For Lila. For the others. No one should live in constant fear like this." Lila, who had been unusually quiet, tugged at Victor's sleeve. "Mr. Langston, can I ask something?" Victor crouched beside her, smiling gently. "Of course. Why did you help me before? When I was little?" Her voice was soft, hesitant. I don't understand. You didn't know me." Victor swallowed hard. Memories flooded back. The park bench, the wallet, the small hand reaching out to him. He hadn't thought of it in years, but now it felt like it had been waiting for this moment, waiting to be acknowledged. I don't know if I can explain fully," he said carefully. "I just saw you and I knew someone had to help. And I did. Back then, I didn't realize how important that moment would become, or how it would connect us years later. But here we are." Lila's eyes glistened. "So, you remember me?" Victor nodded. "Every detail I can. I never forgot. And now, I won't let anything happen to you or the others." Angela looked at him, a mixture of awe and relief washing over her face. "Victor, I can't believe this. You're part of her life in a way I never expected." Victor's thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, a subtle knock at the door. His pulse quickened. "Who is it?" Angela whispered. Victor moved cautiously, peering through the peephole. The hallway was empty. No shadow, no figure. He relaxed slightly, but only slightly. The intruders from earlier were still out there, and this could be a distraction, a test, or worse. He returned to the table. "We focus on what we can control. Legal documents, security, relocation plans. Every possible step to protect the children. And we do it fast." Angela nodded, shuffling papers. "I've kept detailed logs of everything: school attendance, doctor visits, interactions with social workers. They might not have seen it before, but now we can show the court a complete picture." Victor's mind raced. Legal proof was one thing, but the threat wasn't just paperwork. The people watching them, the shadow from the street, and whoever had sent the warning message were still active. They were hunting, waiting for a moment of weakness. And Victor couldn't afford one. He glanced at Lila, who was quietly sketching on a notepad. Something about the intensity in her gaze made his chest tighten. He knew this wasn't just about protection anymore, it was about understanding. About uncovering the deeper truth of why their lives were intertwined, why she had been significant to him before anyone else had even noticed. Victor made a decision. Angela, tonight I want us to review everything thoroughly. Every document, every memory, every scrap of evidence. We need to prepare for court. And we need to prepare for what's coming after court, the people who won't stop. Angela exhaled, nodding. I'll get the children ready for bed. They need to rest, even if they don't fully understand what's happening. Victor moved to the window, looking out into the night. The city lights twinkled deceptively, masking the dangers that lurked in shadowed streets. He felt the weight of responsibility like never before. This wasn't a problem that could be solved with wealth or influence alone. This was human lives, delicate and vulnerable, tethered to a past that refused to stay buried. He returned to the table. We're going to fight this the right way, he said. And when we do, we'll find the truth behind why Lila and these children are connected to my life. The answers are here somewhere, and I intend to uncover them. Angela looked up at him, hope mingled with fear in her expression. Victor, you're incredible. I don't know what we'd do without you. Victor shook his head. No, you've already done everything. I'm just here to make sure it counts. He glanced at Lila once more. And for you, little one, we're just getting started. Outside, the city carried on unaware. But in the safe house, a quiet determination settled. They were preparing for the fight of their lives. And Victor knew the coming days would reveal truths that would change everything they thought they knew about the past, the present, and the fragile bond that connected them all. And somewhere, lurking just beyond the edges of the safe house, someone was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Victor spent the morning reviewing every detail Angela had provided. The documents were thorough: school records, medical files, and countless notes tracking the children's care. But Victor knew that the law wasn't always swayed by evidence alone. The system often favored structure over sacrifice, paper over humanity. Angela watched him, silent, tired, and wary. Victor, are we going to be okay? She asked quietly. Her eyes flicked to the children, who were playing quietly nearby, too young to fully understand the danger but old enough to sense the tension in the room. Victor exhaled slowly. We will be. But this isn't just about legal filings. We have to anticipate the people who will try to stop us. This goes beyond paperwork. Some of the threats they made, they weren't idle. Angela shivered. You think they'll try again? I don't think, Victor said firmly. I know. He pulled out his phone and made a series of calls. Within the hour, a discreet team of security professionals had been assembled. Background checks, surveillance, planning secure routes. They weren't just protecting the children from intruders. They were creating a shield for the truth itself. Hours later, the first meeting with Victor's legal team began. The lawyers were precise, methodical, but Victor sensed the undercurrent of bureaucracy that could stall or complicate their fight. They laid out the strategy: documentation, witness statements, and evidence of Angela's guardianship over the children. It was solid, but he could tell there would be hurdles. One lawyer leaned forward. Mr. Langston, while the documentation is strong, there's the matter of the children's biological relatives. Any claim they make could complicate the case. You'll need more than records. You'll need testimony and protection against outside influence. Victor nodded, already thinking ahead. We'll handle that. But first, I need to know everything about their past, the people who could interfere, who might come forward. Angela, you need to tell me everything. Angela hesitated, glancing at the children playing quietly nearby. There's a lot, she admitted. Some of it is painful. Some of it is dangerous. Their biological families, they weren't always kind. And there were people who took advantage of their vulnerability. That's why I kept them hidden. Victor felt his jaw tighten. Hidden from whom? Angela swallowed, her voice trembling. From anyone who might claim them for the wrong reasons. From relatives who didn't care about their well-being, only control. There were men and women who wanted something from them: money, influence, power. And I couldn't risk it. Victor's mind raced. The shadows from the street, the intruders from the earlier confrontation, they were only the beginning. The danger extended beyond physical threats. There were people who could manipulate the system, people who could lie in court, people who had already tried to take the children before Angela intervened. Lila, sitting quietly, tilted her head. Victor, you said you were going to find out why we are connected to you. Do you know yet? Victor's chest tightened. He hadn't yet pieced it together, but he could feel it, the invisible thread linking their lives. He studied her, noticing the faint scar on her wrist again, the intensity in her eyes, the sense of awareness beyond her years. I'm close, he admitted. But there's more we need to uncover. And I think part of that involves your past, the people who wanted to harm or control you. It all connects. Angela exhaled slowly. I was afraid this day would come. I hope someone with resources, someone who actually cared, would find you in time. I didn't think it would be so soon. Victor's phone buzzed. A new message, we're watching. Don't trust anyone. He felt a cold wave run through him. Someone was still actively observing them, still interfering, still hunting. Victor looked at Angela and the children. We're not just fighting a legal battle anymore. We're fighting for safety, for truth, for control over the lives that have been threatened for years. And the next steps have to be careful, calculated, but decisive. Angela nodded, eyes wide but resolute. We're ready, she said softly. Victor felt the weight of responsibility settle on him like never before. Protecting the children wasn't just about law or resources anymore. It was about uncovering hidden truths, confronting dangerous people, and ensuring that Lila and the others were never used as pawns again. And somewhere in the shadows beyond the safe house, the people who had been watching, waiting, and manipulating knew that the fight for these children had truly begun. Victor's gaze returned to Lila. He clenched his jaw. Whatever it took, he would get to the bottom of this. And he had a sinking feeling that the answers he would find would shock him, and change everything he thought he knew about her past and theirs. Victor sat in the dim light of the safe house, the city's glow filtering faintly through the blinds. The children were asleep, Angela had finally taken a brief rest, and for a moment, the apartment felt almost peaceful. But Victor knew better. The danger wasn't gone, it had only been postponed. He turned his attention back to the files Angela had laid out earlier. Among the documents, a set of old photographs caught his eye. They were pictures of children in foster care taken years ago, including one particular photo of a little girl, small, determined eyes staring straight into the camera. The girl in the photo was unmistakably Lila. Victor's heart tightened. He studied the date on the photograph, 10 years ago. His mind flickered back to the memory of a cold street corner, a dropped wallet, a small hand offering it back to him. The memory was faint, almost like a half-remembered dream, but now it made sense. The girl in that picture, the hand that had reached out to him, was Lila. Angela stirred beside him, noticing his focus. "What is it?" she asked softly, her voice cautious. Victor held up the photograph. This is her. Lila. She was here before, long before today. And I helped her back then without even realizing it. I didn't know she'd come back into my life like this." Angela's eyes widened. You knew her?" Victor shook his head slowly. "Not fully. Not consciously. But now I remember. That day on the street. I saved her from something. Something small, but it mattered. And now, years later, she's here and I realize it connects. Her past, your protection, and my life, they're intertwined in ways I'm only beginning to understand." Lila's quiet presence in the next room seemed to echo in his mind. The scar on her wrist, the maturity in her eyes beyond her years, the way she had instinctively known how to navigate danger, it all pointed to a past shaped by survival, by threats, and by people who had underestimated her. Victor leaned back thinking, this changes everything. Whoever is watching us, they know her history. They know she's important. And if they've been tracking her, then they've been watching me too. All along. Angela's voice was barely a whisper. I've tried to keep her safe. I've hidden every trace of her life. But some things can't be erased. Victor's jaw tightened. Then we make sure she's untouchable now. We protect her legally, physically, and strategically. No gaps. No loopholes. No mistakes. Angela nodded, a mixture of fear and relief washing over her. Victor, I've done everything I could. But now, with you here, maybe we actually have a chance. Victor stood and walked to the window, peering into the streets below. The city hummed quietly, but he could feel the pulse of danger lurking in the shadows. Whoever had sent the messages, whoever had been watching, they weren't gone. And they wouldn't give up easily. He turned back to Angela. We need to map out everything. Every person who could claim the children, every past threat, every shadow in their history. And then we neutralize it. One by one if we have to. Angela swallowed hard. It's a lot. I've carried this alone for years. I don't know if I can. You can, Victor said firmly. Because I'll be with you. And because these kids, especially Lila, deserve someone who will fight for them with everything they have. He glanced toward the children's rooms. Their small forms were visible in the faint moonlight, sleeping peacefully. But Victor knew peace was fragile, temporary. He had seen too much, lived too much, to be lulled by a momentary calm. Then a thought struck him, sudden and sharp. If Lila had been connected to him all these years, if someone had been tracking her from that first moment, then perhaps the threats weren't just about Angela's guardianship or the children's safety, they were about him. Victor's pulse quickened. This was bigger than he had realized. And the stakes were no longer just about saving children, they were about confronting people who had targeted them for reasons tied directly to his life, his past, and the choices he had made years ago. Angela watched him closely. Victor, what is it? Victor met her gaze, determination hardening in his eyes. It's not just about protecting them from the past anymore. It's about uncovering who's behind all of this and why. And when we find out, it's going to shock all of us. The weight of the revelation pressed on him, heavy but clarifying. The pieces were finally aligning. Lila, the children, Angela, and his own past, they weren't separate threads. They were a single story. And the truth, once revealed, could change everything. Victor exhaled slowly, steeling himself. Tonight we start connecting the dots. Every hidden fact, every secret, every shadow from their past. And we prepare for what comes next. Because whoever is out there, they won't stop until they get what they're after. Outside, the city lights flickered, oblivious to the lives being reshaped within the walls of the safe house. But inside, Victor knew one thing with absolute certainty. The real fight was just beginning. Victor barely slept that night. The realization that the threats might be tied to his own past kept circling his mind, tightening like a slow knot. By morning, the safe house felt smaller, the walls closing in with unspoken questions. Angela brewed coffee quietly, careful not to wake the children. The smell filled the room, grounding, almost comforting. You look like you didn't sleep at all, she said softly. I didn't, Victor replied. And I won't until I know who's behind this. He set his laptop on the table and began pulling records. Old business dealings, lawsuits, settlements, charities he had funded quietly. For years, Victor had believed that money could insulate him from consequences. Now he was seeing how naive that assumption had been. Influence left traces. And enemies. Angela watched as names and dates scrolled across the screen. You think this started with you? Victor hesitated. I think I crossed paths with someone who never forgot it. And I think Lila was collateral, until she wasn't. The words felt heavy. He hated the idea that a child could be targeted because of him, because of choices he'd made years ago without ever imagining this outcome. A few hours later, Victor stepped outside to make a call. He kept his voice low. I need you to look into old foster care contracts from about 10 years ago. Anything irregular. Especially cases that were quietly transferred or sealed. There was a pause on the other end. Then, that won't be easy. I know, Victor said. That's why I'm calling you. When he hung up, he noticed Lila standing a few feet away, clutching a stuffed animal. She looked up at him, serious. You're scared, she said. Victor crouched, surprised. I'm careful, he corrected gently. She shook her head. No, you're scared. But you're still helping us. That means something. The simplicity of her observation struck him harder than any threat. "Yes," he said quietly. "It does." Later that afternoon, Angela received a call of her own. She listened silently, her face draining of color. When she hung up, she didn't speak right away. "Angela?" Victor asked. "There's been a filing," she said finally. "An emergency petition. Someone is claiming the children were taken unlawfully years ago. They're demanding immediate custody review." Victor's jaw tightened. "Who filed it?" "That's the thing," Angela replied. "It's through a proxy. A shell organization. But I recognize the language. I've seen it before." Victor felt a chill. "Where?" "In the first case I ever fought," she said. "Before I took Lila in. The same legal firm. The same arguments. They lost back then, but they didn't stop." The pieces slammed together in Victor's mind. They've been waiting. Letting time pass. Letting the kids grow. And now they think they have leverage. Angela nodded. "They're counting on fear. On exhaustion. On me backing down." Victor stood. "That won't happen." His phone buzzed almost immediately. A message from his contact appeared on the screen. "Found something. Old settlement. Non-disclosure. You paid to keep a foster care abuse case quiet. One child involved. Female." Victor's breath caught. He remembered it now, years ago, a case brought to his company's doorstep. Allegations buried under legal language and urgency. He had signed off on a settlement without ever seeing the child's face. His hands shook slightly as he typed back. "Name." The reply came seconds later. "Record sealed. But the age matches. And the scar you mentioned? It was documented." Victor's world tilted. The room felt too loud, too bright. Angela watched him, dread creeping into her expression. "Victor, what is it?" He swallowed hard. "The case I settled years ago. The one I thought I'd helped resolve quietly. Lila was the child." Angela staggered back into the chair. "You mean, she was hurt because of something connected to you?" Victor shook his head fiercely. "No. She was hurt because someone abused power. I tried to stop it after the fact, but I didn't do enough. I didn't stay. I didn't follow through. And now they're back, trying to erase their mistakes by taking her." Silence settled between them, heavy and suffocating. Lila's voice cut through it. "So, you knew before?" Victor turned to her, his chest aching. "I didn't know it was you. But I know now. And I won't make the same mistake again." Outside, a car idled too long at the corner. Victor noticed immediately. His instinct screamed. "They've accelerated," he said quietly. "The legal attack is just the beginning." Angela nodded, fear sharpening into resolve. "Then we don't run anymore." Victor's eyes hardened. "No. We expose them." As the car finally pulled away, Victor understood the truth fully now. The second twist was no longer looming, it had arrived. Lila wasn't just connected to his past by chance. She was the unfinished business he'd unknowingly left behind. And this time, walking away was not an option. Victor paced the small safe house, the glow from his laptop casting shadows on the walls. The children were asleep. Angela had retreated to a corner with a cup of tea, and for the first time since this ordeal began, Victor allowed himself to think strategically instead of reactively. The emergency custody filing had escalated the situation beyond mere threats. Whoever had orchestrated this wasn't just after the children. They were leveraging legal power, old records, and secrets that Victor hadn't fully considered until now. Angela joined him, her hands wringing a towel nervously. "Victor, what do we do first? I don't have the strength to fight this alone." "You won't be alone," he said firmly. "But we need to anticipate every move. We start by tracing the filing, finding who pulled the strings, who benefits from this, and what leverage they think they have." Angela swallowed hard. "It's complicated. Some of the records are intentionally obfuscated. Shell organizations, proxy lawyers, they know what they're doing." Victor's jaw tightened. "Then we'll outsmart them. Step by step. No rush. Every move precise." He opened his laptop, pulling up the sealed settlement from years ago. It had been a routine legal maneuver at the time. A payment, a non-disclosure agreement, a file tucked away in legal archives. But now it took on a darker significance. The child listed in the documents, the one he had quietly paid to protect, was Lila. His mind flashed back to the moment in the park years ago. He had remembered a small hand returning a lost wallet, a face too young to understand the weight of the world. He hadn't realized then that he was looking at the same child he was now tasked with protecting. Angela touched his arm. "Victor, you knew her before?" "I didn't know it was her," he admitted. "Not until now. But every instinct I had when I saw her today, it all makes sense. The scar on her wrist, her intuition, the way she reads danger. She survived because someone failed her once, and I was unknowingly part of that past." Angela's eyes widened. "We have to make sure she's never vulnerable like that again." Victor nodded. "Exactly. But we also need leverage. The people who filed this petition are counting on fear, fatigue, and secrecy. We strip that away. Publicize what needs to be publicized, legally, strategically. Every shadow they're hiding in, we illuminate." He leaned back in his chair, scanning through old emails and settlement notes. There were patterns, connections, names that hadn't mattered before but now felt urgent. A lawyer who had handled the previous case, a former foster coordinator, a few local politicians who had signed off quietly on closed files. "They're organized," Angela said, her voice shaking slightly. "They know the system. They know how to exploit it." Victor's lips pressed together. "Then we become just as organized, only smarter. And we protect the children every step of the way. First, we secure testimony from witnesses who remember the past, people who can corroborate Angela's guardianship and the abuse history. Second, we prepare counter-evidence for the court. Third," his voice dropped slightly, more to himself than Angela, "we anticipate attempts to intimidate or manipulate them." Angela's eyes narrowed. "You're saying they might try a what?" Victor shook his head. "Intimidation, bribery, false claims. They've done it before. They won't hesitate now that they realize Lila is tied to me. That connection changes everything for them. And for us." The gravity of the situation pressed on them. The legal battle was no longer just paperwork, it was personal, dangerous, and unpredictable. Every step had consequences, and missteps could put the children in immediate danger. Victor's phone buzzed. A secure message from his contact appeared, tracing the filing. "Old contacts active. They've already started surveillance. Legal moves are being coordinated with threats off record." Victor's eyes darkened. "They're preparing for confrontation. Not just in court but outside of it." Angela exhaled slowly. "Victor, do you think they'll try to take the children directly?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied the ceiling, thinking through worst-case scenarios. "It's possible," he said finally. "And that's why we move first, act decisively, and cover every angle. Tonight, we plan every detail, escape routes, safe contacts, legal strategy, everything. No surprises." Angela nodded, understanding the seriousness in his voice. "We'll do it together," she said softly. Victor looked at Lila's sleeping form in the next room. She had survived once, unknowingly, under his protection. This time he would not allow anything, or anyone, to threaten her. Outside, the city lights twinkled peacefully, oblivious to the storm gathering inside the safe house. But Victor knew the fight was far from over. The shadows that had haunted Lila, the threats from the past, and the people manipulating the legal system were all still active. And this time he was ready. Victor sat in the safe house's small study, maps, documents, and laptops spread around him like a war room. The faint hum of the city outside contrasted sharply with the tension inside. Every shadow, every street corner, every email now carried weight. He couldn't afford mistakes. Angela entered, carrying a folder. "Victor, I spoke to some old contacts. They're willing to testify, but they're afraid. The people behind this, they intimidate anyone who gets close." Victor leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "Then we protect the witnesses first. Everyone involved has to be untouchable. Legally, physically, no gaps." He picked up a phone and made a series of calls, arranging discreet security for each potential witness. He knew from experience that people who were desperate or malicious wouldn't hesitate to act outside the law if it suited them. Angela's eyes narrowed. Victor, you're not just fighting in court. You're preparing for confrontation. Real confrontation. He nodded. Exactly. Because these people don't play fair. They'll use loopholes, threats, even violence if they think it'll work. We have to stay 2 steps ahead. Always. Lila appeared at the doorway, small but resolute. Mr. Langston, are they going to try to take us? Her voice was soft, but it carried that edge of fear he had seen in children who had survived too much too young. Victor crouched to meet her eyes. They might try. That's why we're preparing. You're safe here, I promise. But we need everyone to stay alert, and we need to be smart. She nodded, biting her lip. I can be smart. He smiled faintly, a spark of warmth amidst the tension. I know you can. By late afternoon, Victor and Angela began tracing the origins of the legal filing. Shell companies, proxy lawyers, and forged affidavits led them through a complex web. Every step revealed a new layer of the people behind it, and with every revelation Victor realized the stakes were higher than he had anticipated. These aren't just opportunists, Victor said, frowning at the screen. They're organized, connected, and willing to cross lines most people wouldn't even imagine. And they think they have leverage because they know Lila's history, and because of me. Angela swallowed hard. They're counting on fear, on hesitation, on you being cautious. Victor shook his head. We can't hesitate. Every move has to be decisive. If they think we're afraid, if they sense any weakness, they'll strike. He reviewed surveillance photos from earlier investigations. A few familiar faces lingered near locations the children had visited in the past. The intruders weren't just legal manipulators, they were watching. And they had been for months. Victor's mind raced. We'll have to move some of the children temporarily. Rotate them, keep them off predictable patterns. If these people think they know their routines, they'll try to exploit that. Angela nodded, glancing at the sleeping children. It's terrifying to think about. But I trust you, Victor. Victor exhaled slowly. Trust isn't enough. We need proof. Evidence. We need to force these people into the light before they can act in darkness. As evening fell, Victor received a message from his private investigator. Found something. The petitioner's connection runs deep, old associates from your corporate past. They've been building influence quietly. They know the loopholes. Victor's jaw tightened. So they've been planning this for years. They waited for Lila to grow, for Angela to become complacent, for the timing to be perfect. Angela placed a hand on his shoulder. Victor, what do we do now? He looked out the window, eyes narrowing. Now we take control. We expose them. We protect the children. And we make sure anyone trying to manipulate the law or threaten us knows that we're not going to back down. The city outside was indifferent, lights twinkling innocently while shadows moved in silence. Victor felt the weight of every decision pressing down on him. Every step he took, every plan he made had consequences. Some visible, some hidden, and some he could only guess at. But he couldn't afford to hesitate. Not now. Not with Lila and the others depending on him. Angela watched him, worry etched in her expression. Victor, promise me we'll get through this. He met her gaze, determination hardening his features. We will. But we have to be smarter than they are. Faster than they expect. And we can't make mistakes. Because if we do, they'll take more than the children. They'll take everything we care about. A distant sound of tires on asphalt echoed faintly outside. Victor didn't flinch. He had been waiting for this. The confrontation, legal, personal, physical, was no longer avoidable. And as night fell, Victor knew one thing with absolute certainty. The next move would determine everything. Victor leaned over the table, maps, documents, and photographs spread around him like pieces of a puzzle. Every detail, every person, every connection mattered. The more he dug, the more he realized how calculated the attack on Lila and the other children had been. Angela stood beside him, anxiety written across her face. Victor, are you sure we can face them directly? I mean, they've been planning this for years. Victor's gaze didn't waver. We don't have a choice. Every delay gives them time to manipulate, intimidate, and hide. If we wait, we lose. His phone buzzed, a secure message from his investigator. I have a meeting lined up with one of their insiders. We'll be discreet. Could reveal everything if we play it right. Victor exhaled slowly. This was the moment he had been waiting for. A direct line to the people orchestrating this chaos. But he knew it was dangerous. One wrong move, one misstep, and they could lose everything. Angela's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. Victor, be careful. I don't want to lose you too. He smiled faintly, a shadow of warmth in the tense room. I've been careful my whole life. But careful won't win this fight. Boldness will. The meeting was arranged at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Boston, a neutral space where eyes could be discreetly watched, conversations monitored. Victor arrived early, scanning the area with trained attention. A man in his 40s, suited but nervous, approached the table and slid into the chair across from him. Mr. Langston, the man whispered. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. Victor studied him. You've been watching the children for months, correct? The man swallowed. I don't have a choice. They're dangerous. The people behind this, they're organized, ruthless. And they're not just after custody. They're after your connection, your history. Victor leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Explain. The man glanced around, lowering his voice further. The filing, the emergency petition. It's all part of a larger plan. They've been waiting for the perfect moment to exploit your past. That settlement years ago, they know it involved a child. And now that child is Lila. They want leverage. They want control. And they think the law will give it to them if they act cleverly enough. Victor felt a cold edge settle over him. And they've been patient for years, waiting for the timing to be perfect. The man nodded. Exactly. They've got lawyers, connections, even people in foster care administration. They've manipulated cases before. But they never anticipated someone like you stepping in. Someone who actually cares and is willing to fight back. Victor exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the revelation sink in. So everything we've seen, the warnings, the surveillance, the threats, they were testing us. Measuring our response. Yes, the man confirmed. And the next steps, they're unpredictable. Once the court gets involved, things will escalate quickly. You need proof, witnesses, airtight documentation. And you need to anticipate actions outside the courtroom. Victor's jaw tightened. He thought of Lila, asleep at the safe house, small and vulnerable yet fearless in ways he admired. He would not allow anyone to harm her, not legally, not physically, not emotionally. The man hesitated. I can give you some names, contacts, but you have to act fast. They're not going to wait. Victor nodded. I understand. And one more thing, the people behind this, they targeted Lila before because of me, right? The insider's expression hardened. Yes. That's why they were patient. They waited for you to step into her life, to connect. They thought that would make her more accessible. They were wrong. Victor felt a surge of resolve. Good. Because they'll find out how wrong they are. As he left the cafe, Victor's mind raced. The legal battle, the physical threats, the hidden connections, all of it was now mapped clearly. But knowing the plan didn't make it easier. Every move would be watched, every decision scrutinized. Back at the safe house, he gathered Angela and the children. We know who we're up against now, he said. And we know how they're thinking. From this point on, every step we take will be precise. Every move calculated. We'll protect you, we'll fight for you, and we won't let anyone control your lives. Lila looked at him, eyes wide but resolute. Then let's do it, she said simply. Victor smiled faintly. Yes, we do it together. And we start now. Outside, the city moved on, unaware. But Victor knew the storm had only begun, and the people who had orchestrated this elaborate plot were about to learn that patience had met its match. Victor returned to the safe house late that evening, the weight of the day pressing heavily on his shoulders. The city was quieter than usual, streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. But Victor knew better. Silence didn't mean safety, it meant opportunity. Someone somewhere was still watching. Angela greeted him with a tired smile. Did you get what you needed? Victor nodded, setting his laptop on the table. I have names, connections, patterns. Enough to start dismantling their plan piece by piece. But we have to act carefully. Precision over speed. The children were already asleep, the soft hum of the baby monitor filling the room. Lila's small form peeked from under her blanket. She had overheard enough to understand danger, yet trusted Victor completely. That trust weighed on him more than any threat he had ever faced. Victor spread out the documents he had gathered, highlighting key individuals, the lawyers filing the petition, the associates from his old corporate past, and the shadowy contacts who had been pulling strings for years. Each one represented a potential threat, but also a key to dismantling the whole operation. Angela leaned closer. Victor, how do we start? He traced a path on the city map. Step 1. Secure every witness and piece of evidence that can support Angela's guardianship and expose the malicious filings. Step 2. Ensure the children's movements are unpredictable. Rotate locations, routines, and patterns. Step 3. Pressure their network legally and publicly to force mistakes. And Step 4. His voice dropped slightly, almost to himself. We uncover why they've been so focused on Lila, and why now. Angela swallowed. You really think they've been waiting all this time, just to strike now? Victor's jaw tightened. Yes. And they didn't anticipate that I'd connect the dots so quickly. That was their mistake. Their arrogance will be their downfall. He made calls to trusted security teams, arranging surveillance and safe houses for the children in rotation. Each movement, each precaution was designed to protect the children while keeping the antagonists off balance. Hours later, Victor received an encrypted message from his investigator, found linked to financial backers. Offshore accounts, shell companies. They're funneling money to manipulate lawyers and court officials. If you can expose this, their credibility collapses. Victor's mind raced. This isn't just about legal maneuvering. They've built a network of influence spanning years, all designed to keep Lila vulnerable. Angela's hand trembled as she helped organize the files. And you're going to expose it? Victor's eyes hardened. We don't just expose it. We dismantle it. Every connection, every payment, every contact. They think they're untouchable because of wealth and influence. They're not. Later, as he reviewed witness statements and documentation, Victor's thoughts returned to Lila. That quiet strength, the scar she bore, the resilience that had carried her through years of hidden danger, it all pointed to one undeniable truth. She had survived because someone had cared, someone had acted. And this time he would be that someone fully aware, fully prepared. Angela looked at him, exhausted but determined. Victor, I've never seen anyone fight like you do. You're relentless. Victor managed a faint smile. I've had practice. But this is different. It's personal. And it's not just about fighting, it's about making sure the past doesn't repeat itself. For her, for the other children, for everyone involved. Outside, faint headlights glimmered across the street. Victor paused, watching. The feeling of being observed never left him. Whoever had orchestrated the petition and the threats was still out there. Still active. Still confident in their control. He returned to the documents, his mind calculating every possibility. We act fast. And we act smart. Every step will be covered. Every move anticipated. And when we confront them, his voice dropped, barely audible. They won't know what hit them. Angela nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. Then let's do it. For the children. For Lila. Victor glanced at the children's rooms one last time. The soft breathing of the kids was a fragile shield against the chaos outside. And he vowed silently that no one, no threat, no lawyer, no shadow from the past, would take that from them. Tonight was planning. Tomorrow was execution. And somewhere in the shadows, the people who thought they had control would soon discover that Victor Langston had a plan they hadn't anticipated, and a determination that would not be broken. Victor watched the city from the rooftop of the safe house, lights flickering below like stars caught in concrete. The calm of the night was deceiving. Every shadow, every quiet hum of traffic, every distant footstep could conceal danger. Angela approached cautiously, holding a folder of witness statements. Victor, they're not going to wait. I spoke to one of our contacts, someone close to the petitioners. They're panicking, trying to find loopholes before we can expose them. Victor's jaw tightened. Good. Panic leads to mistakes, and mistakes are what we need. He turned back to the documents spread before him. The offshore accounts, shell companies, manipulated court filings, all of it had been painstakingly connected. Tonight, the plan would move from strategy to action. The first target was a lawyer who had handled multiple filings for the petitioners. Victor had obtained evidence of illegal influence, hidden payments, and forged signatures. He also knew the lawyer had a secret, one that could unravel everything if exposed correctly. Angela swallowed nervously. Victor, are you sure this is safe? Victor's eyes met hers, unflinching. Safe isn't an option. Effective is. We don't just win on paper, we force them into the light. And once they're exposed, everything collapses. They made their way to the lawyer's office under cover of night. Victor had coordinated with trusted security personnel who positioned themselves discreetly outside. They weren't here to confront with violence. They were here to gather proof, catch deception, and ensure nothing could stop the legal counterattack. Inside the office, Victor confronted the lawyer directly. I know what you've done. The payments, the influence, the filings, all of it. And you know why it's wrong, don't you? The lawyer laughed, a thin, brittle sound. You have no idea who you're dealing with. This isn't just about money, it's about control. People like me make the rules and people like you react. Victor leaned forward, calm but firm. No, people like me act. And you're about to be exposed. Every falsified document, every manipulated file, your client's empire of fear ends tonight. The lawyer's face paled. Victor handed over a folder, meticulously organized, showing evidence of illegal influence, forged affidavits, and financial misconduct. You have a choice, Victor said. Cooperate fully or face public exposure and criminal investigation. The choice is yours. Minutes later, the lawyer broke, shaking. Names spilled, connections revealed, offshore accounts detailed. Victor listened quietly, cataloging every piece. Each revelation brought him closer to dismantling the network that had targeted Lila, Angela, and the other children. Back at the safe house, Victor and Angela reviewed the new information. Every lead exposed a deeper level of corruption, people manipulating the system for years, counting on fear, secrecy, and control. And now, thanks to the insider and Victor's meticulous planning, they were vulnerable. Victor's phone buzzed. A secure message appeared, unexpected. Someone close to you has been feeding them information. Check trust lines. His chest tightened. Betrayal. Someone within their circle had been compromising their safety. Someone who had known about the children, their movements, and their legal strategy. Angela's eyes widened. Victor, who could it be? Victor shook his head slowly, mind racing. I don't know yet. But if someone this close is leaking information, it explains why they've always seemed one step ahead. We need to find them before they strike, and before the children are at risk. The room fell silent. The weight of the revelation pressed heavily. Lila and the other children were vulnerable not just to external threats, but to someone within their inner circle. Victor looked at Angela. This changes everything. We've dismantled part of their network, but now we're dealing with someone inside. And we can't underestimate them. Angela swallowed hard. Do you think, could it be someone we trusted? Victor's eyes hardened. It has to be someone with access. Someone who knows routines, patterns. Someone who thought they could hide behind us. And that's exactly what we'll expose. Outside, the city continued its quiet pulse. But Victor knew danger was closer than ever. The legal battles, the hidden manipulations, the betrayals, they were all converging. And tomorrow, when the court convened, every revelation, every truth, every deception would come to a head. Victor clenched his fists, determination burning in his eyes. We end this. Tonight, we uncover every secret, every betrayal, every hidden hand. No one threatens these children and walks away. And in the shadows, someone was watching. realizing that their plans, built over years, were unraveling faster than they could ever anticipate. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant, a scent Victor had always associated with decisions that couldn't be undone. He sat in the second row, hands folded, posture steady, while Angela sat beside him, her knee bouncing despite her efforts to stay still. Behind them, the children waited in a quiet room with a court officer, unaware of how much depended on what would happen in the next few hours. When the judge entered, the room rose as one. Victor felt the weight of every step that had led them here. The nights without sleep, the whispered phone calls, the files stacked on dining tables that were never meant to hold evidence of corruption. The opposing counsel stood first. Their confidence was thinner now, stretched tight over a fragile foundation. They spoke of procedure, of concerns, of carefully chosen phrases meant to sound neutral while implying danger. Victor listened without reaction. He had learned long ago that real power didn't interrupt. It waited. Then it was their turn. Victor's attorney began calmly, methodically. Documents were submitted. Timelines were laid out. Names were spoken aloud for the first time in a public space. The shell companies. The payments. The forged filings. The pattern of influence that had followed the children like a shadow for years. The courtroom shifted. The judge leaned forward. Then came the moment Victor had both anticipated and dreaded. A name was called from their own side. Someone Victor had trusted. The betrayal unfolded not with drama, but with quiet precision. Text logs. Bank transfers. Testimony that cracked under its own weight. The truth wasn't shouted. It was revealed, piece by piece, until there was nowhere left to look but straight at it. Angela's breath caught. Victor didn't move. When the witness finally broke down, admitting to feeding information out of fear and financial pressure, Victor felt something loosen inside his chest. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Just clarity. The last missing piece had fallen into place. The judge called a recess. In the hallway, Angela pressed her hands together, eyes wet. "It's over, isn't it?" Victor didn't answer right away. He looked down the corridor where people passed without knowing what had just been exposed. "It's ending," he said carefully. "That's not the same thing." When court resumed, the ruling came slower than anyone expected. The judge spoke deliberately, acknowledging the severity of what had been uncovered. The emergency petition was dismissed. A full investigation was ordered into the network behind it. Temporary guardianship was granted to Angela, with clear language protecting the children from further interference. The sound of the gavel was softer than Victor expected. Angela covered her mouth, shoulders shaking as the meaning finally landed. Across the room, the opposing side avoided eye contact. Their silence was louder than any protest could have been. Later, outside the courthouse, the sky hung low and gray. The children ran toward Angela, confused but smiling, sensing freedom even if they didn't yet understand it. Lila stopped in front of Victor. "So, we're okay?" she asked. Victor crouched to her level. "Yes." Not because bad things didn't happen, but because the truth finally caught up. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded as if filing the lesson away for later. Weeks passed. Life didn't become perfect. It became real. The house was noisier. Mornings were rushed. Arguments happened over homework and chores and who left the lights on. Angela learned how heavy responsibility could feel even on good days. Victor stepped back when needed, stepped in when asked, never confusing control with care again. One evening, Victor stood in the kitchen doorway, watching the children argue over dinner seating. Lila pulled out a chair for the youngest without being asked. Angela caught Victor's eye and smiled, tired but genuine. That was when he understood something that wealth had never taught him. Protection wasn't about power. It was about presence. Some truths arrived too late to fix the past, but just in time to change the future. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that quiet courage matters, and that doing the right thing rarely looks dramatic, stay with this channel. These stories continue because people like you listen. Subscribe, and if you feel like it, leave a comment. Not about victory. About what you would have done if you were standing in that courtroom too.